Have you ever looked at the ruins of the ancient world and wondered how it all began? Not with slow, halting steps, but with a sudden explosion of knowledge. Scare. Our story starts with some of the oldest clay tablets ever found. From the ancient Sumerian cities of Eridu and Uruk, these fragile fragments, some dating back over 5,000 years, don't just list grain and livestock, okay? They whisper of beings who existed before history as we know it, beings who watched from the heavens and possessed knowledge that transformed scattered settlements into the world's first cities. According to these texts, the past wasn't a slow climb. It was a moment when guidance arrived. The very first city, Eridu, is remembered as a gift. Sumerian tradition says divine instructors descended when the world was young, teaching humanity how to build, how to irrigate, how to live together. Archaeologists digging at Eridu found that the deepest, oldest layers of the city revealed architectural knowledge that seems to appear fully formed, not developed over time. To the people who wrote these records, civilization wasn't invented, it was delivered. These instructors were called the Apkallu, the great sages from the water. They taught metallurgy, urban planning, and the core principles of city life. Tablets from Uruk add even more detail, describing 7 primary watchers, each governing a specific domain of knowledge. They opened the eyes of humanity and gave them the me, the divine decrees, the cosmic laws that organize civilization. The me weren't just vague blessings. They were a blueprint for society, covering law, labor, ritual, and architecture. These watchers, the texts claim, could even see across the waters of time. This is where myth and history begin to merge. The most famous document from this era is the Sumerian King List, compiled around 2100 BC, describes a time before a great flood when kings ruled for impossibly long lifespans, tens of thousands of years. Alongside these kings, the list names 7 sages who served as their advisors. The first sage, Adapa, was said to have completed the plans of heaven and earth. Another, Uanna, was described by a later historian as an amphibious being who emerged from the Persian Gulf to teach humanity writing, mathematics, and astronomy. The message is clear. These sages worked with human rulers to establish the foundations of civilization. The very words used in these ancient languages preserve the footprints of this idea. A Sumerian term for a divine being evolved to mean an entity who maintained constant surveillance over human activity. The later Akkadian word, Iji, carries the sense of those who see from above, who can observe many places at once. This watcher concept persisted for centuries, even appearing in the Hebrew book of Daniel, with linguistic roots tracing all the way back to Akkadian. The continuity suggests this wasn't just a myth, but a deeply embedded tradition of contact with non-human intelligence. And it's not just in the texts. At a site called Tel Ezawan, dated to around 6000 BC, archaeologists found a settlement with a startlingly sophisticated understanding of astronomy and engineering. They had irrigation canals designed with precise mathematical principles. Their pottery patterns seemed to encode knowledge of planetary movements and lunar cycles, using math that supposedly wasn't rediscovered for millennia. At another site, Jarmo, from around 7000 BC, the buildings used geometric proportions similar to those in later Egyptian and Greek sacred temples. The past doesn't look primitive. It looks like it was built on something that came before. Centuries later, in the Great Library of Nineveh, tablets were found that were copies of much older texts. One states that the watchers brought down from heaven the me of all crafts and established the foundation of learning before the waters rose. That phrase, before the waters rose, connects everything back to a great flood. It introduces another group of beings, the Anunnaki. It's a Babylonian creation epic. The Enuma Elish describes the Anunnaki as primordial beings who established the order of heaven and earth. The famous Plimpton 322 tablet, an 1800 BC artifact, contains trigonometric calculations so advanced they seem to point to a lost older source of knowledge, reinforcing the idea of a sophisticated pre-flood civilization. The Anunnaki pantheon was structured like a government. At the top were Anu, the sky god, Enlil, lord of the atmosphere, and Enki, master of the earth and waters. Ki ruled from the highest heaven, issuing cosmic decrees. Enlil controlled the weather with the power to bring rain or devastating storms. His temple at Nippur had strange underground chambers with advanced ventilation systems. Ki, based in the first city of Eridu, was the master of engineering, genetics, and technology. He was said to have managed groundwater, extracted metals, and even shaped the clay people. These weren't just gods of myth. They were described as administrators with distinct territories and technological capabilities. Disagreements, recorded in ancient dialogues, shaped humanity's fate. Enlil favored strict control, while Enki argued for education and development. Their power was maintained through a mysterious object, the tablets of destinies. These were not ordinary clay slabs. They were described as shining, powerful devices that granted control over the forces of nature. Operating them required specific knowledge, and special ceremonies were held to transfer authority from these divine beings to chosen human kings. In the throne room at the city of Mari, archaeologists found a raised platform with metallic inlays that matched descriptions of these activation ceremonies, with signs of intense heat exposure suggesting a powerful energy discharge. This leads to one of the most incredible claims: human enhancement. The Sumerian King List's long-lived rulers were, according to this narrative, the result of direct intervention. The Atrahasis epic tells the story of human creation as a solution to a labor crisis among the gods. Ki proposed creating a new being to do the work. Ki goddess Nin to mix clay with the blood of a slain god to transfer intelligence. This wasn't a metaphor, it was a procedure. The first humans had long lifespans and direct communication with their creators, traits that faded over generations. This pattern isn't limited to Mesopotamia. Egyptian pyramid texts speak of a golden age called Zep Tepi, the first time when divine beings descended from the sky to rule on earth, establishing a similar territorial system. The impossible precision of the Great Pyramid, with its astronomical alignments and perfect engineering, suggests a shared, advanced source of knowledge connecting these ancient cultures. Then we find the same story in a completely different text, the Book of Enoch, written much later but drawing on older traditions. It describes 200 watchers who descended on Mount Hermon, took human wives, taught forbidden knowledge, metallurgy, astronomy, and enchantments. The parallels to the Mesopotamian sages and the Ajiji are striking. These watchers and their giant offspring were eventually punished, and the world was cleansed by a great flood, a story that echoes the flood narratives of Gilgamesh and Atrahasis, with Noah and Utnapishtim both receiving divine warnings and technical plans to survive. Flood stories from around the globe share these details, suggesting a worldwide event and a coordinated effort to preserve knowledge. This knowledge was stored in institutions. Ziggurats weren't just temples. They were communication towers with astronomical alignments and acoustic chambers. Kist in Egypt and Mesopotamia used shared calendars and astronomical data, pointing to a standardized system of education. These traditions didn't simply vanish. They were transformed, their ideas flowing into later mystery schools, Gnostic texts, and the angelologies of major world religions. Modern theories that identify the Anunnaki and the Watchers as extraterrestrial beings are controversial, but they force us to look at these ancient texts with fresh eyes. Whether you see this as literal history or powerful symbolism, these stories share a common core. They are about sudden knowledge, divine authority, and dangerous gifts. They try to answer a fundamental question: how did we get here so fast? It feels as if someone left us a blueprint, and across thousands of years, different cultures keep returning to the same image: beings from above, watching, teaching, and leaving behind a world of wonders and unanswered questions. Thank you for watching. If you found this journey into the past as fascinating as I did, please like, subscribe, and follow for more.